Hey folks, welcome back. Today it's time for all those things you wish were in D&D but you can't find a rule or a chart for. On today's episode of Dragons and Dice, we're doing nothing but homebrew, a bit of theory crafting on how I like to go about it, and a couple things that you can add in that are fun and might just break your game. Welcome to Dragons and Dice. Okay guys, this is going to be all about homebrew and random roll charts. And I love this part of D&D so much, it's what, in my not so humble opinion, is one of the quintessential aspects of D&D and makes it so flexible and timeless. It's been going on for over 50 years, and one of my favorite things about D&D is that the first rule about it is, if you got something that doesn't work for you or a mechanic you don't like, just change it so it fits your game and works at your table. As somebody that's always been enamored with fantasy books and role-playing video games, I'm always looking at ways that I can either build a character that resembles someone from one of the books I like, or add in a cool weapon or item that was in a video game or a different novel. I think that one of the most fun parts about D&D is that it just gives you the ability to do that, and you can make whatever you can imagine or whatever anyone else has imagined. Here are a few things that I've come up with that I think makes the game more fun. Let's hop into it, and there's no better place to start than adding brutal criticals to your game. So let's check out this homebrew chart. I'm going to start by saying I think crits should be a big and dynamic part of the game. It just makes it for really exciting combat when, all the crazy stuff happens that goes along with a critical. But at the same time, I think it really detracts from the game when you hit that critical and you get to roll double die, and then you just drop a 1 and a 2, and it's like, oh man, I crit and I just did less damage than I normally do on a roll. I don't really enjoy that. I think it kind of detracts from the excitement that a critical hit in a game and combat can cause. And so this is the homebrew rule that we play at my table. When you crit, you get max damage on whatever the first set of dies were. And if that's like a paladin doing a smite, the smite gets max damage too. And then you get to roll all the damage die again. So basically, like brutal critical rules, you get max damage plus another dice roll for every dice involved on that turn's attacks. And I think this works out really well at the table. It gives, a big Nova round. You know when to pop all your cooldowns after you drop that crit, because you're going to get, the maximum effect out of it. And I think it's really fun because it makes combat dynamic and can turn the tides of things when you get a crit, good or bad, because we play these rules both directions. So my monsters also get to do the same brutal criticals when I roll that nat 20, and it'll take people down quick when that giant swinging his oversized longsword hits you for 6d6 and then gets max damage and then gets to roll them die again. You got people dropping like flies when that happens, and it makes for really enticing combat. I'm sure some of you DMs are thinking, wow, that seems like it's going to break the game and make your players way overpowered. And it's true, sometimes you'll get a massive Nova bomb dropped on a monster and it'll shorten combat. But at the same time, it goes both ways. Like I said, sometimes the monsters get those crits and you drop players. It keeps it interesting. But I do feel like this on its own would be a bit unbalanced. And, as they say, there can be no light without the dark. It's my Harry Potter quote day, apparently. So without any further ado, it's time for our first homebrewed chart of the day, and this one's the dreaded negative critical chart. Yep, at my table, if you roll a 1, it's not just a miss. You have to re-roll that d20 and see what that chart gives you. And I love this for 2 reasons. One, it balances out those big crits, and it is freaking hilarious when people roll that 1, and then they got to roll on the chart and find out what's about to happen to them. And it's a great place to add in some funny names and some quirky things for battle. I do these charts for saving throws, for ability checks in and out of combat, and for attack rolls. So let's hop in and check out the dreaded negative critical chart. This is going to be a D20 chart, and I've named each one of these. What I'll do is I'll go through the number, I'll tell you what I named it, and then I'll tell you what the effect it causes in game. So if you roll a 1, that one's called crit your pants, and that's right, you hit yourself. You roll the damage and you take that just like you would if you were giving it out to someone else. 2 will make you sad and your turn just ends, no other attacks or movements. 3, you do friendly fire. You auto hit the closest ally, you roll those damage die, and you hurt your friend. 4 is slippery. You drop your weapon, arcane focus, instrument, or whatever you're using to make the attack, and it takes a bonus action to pick it back up. 5 is emotional trauma. You just skip your next turn. 6 is you rage out. Your standard melee attacks only on your next turn. 7, you overthink it, and it spells only on your next turn, and if you don't have any, you have to skip it. 8 is stubborn, and you have to redo the action you failed on until it's a success. 9 is overcompensate. You have to use as many cooldowns, spells, abilities, etc. on the next turn to try to do as much damage as possible. 10 is fear of failure. No action on the next round. 11 is scared. You have to flee the target you missed with your movement the next round. 12 is embarrassed. You have disadvantage on the next save or attack, and it gives the target advantage if they have to make a save. 13 is make an excuse. And if the DM likes it, nothing. If not, you re-roll on the chart twice. 14 is a blame placer. You roll a new d20 and impose the roll on one of your party members. 15 is overworked. You can only take one action, bonus action, reaction, or movement next turn. 16 is the brain pain. You take 1d8 psychic damage. 17 is contagious. Anyone that moves within 10 feet of you or finishes a turn there has to roll on the chart, and then they are also contagious. That one's fun because it can stack. 18 is think about what you've done. You can't speak until your next turn. If you do, you have to re-roll on the chart. 19 is learn from your mistakes, and you get advantage on your next roll. And 20 is right or wrong. The attack hits and does max damage. Me and my group have really enjoyed these. They're really funny when they pop off mid-combat. I also roll these for the monsters if they negative crit. I think it just keeps it fair. I like that I gave them each a name because then their party's always like, oh man, I hope I get blame placer. That seems to be their favorite right now because then they get to give the negative effects away. It's just really fun when it happens. I will make a little DM note here. If that one happens to cause problems at your table, there's a real easy fix. Instead of letting the character pick who they're going to place the blame on, you can just have them roll a d8 and count around clockwise until it hits on a person. And that'll keep anyone from targeting each other if that's a problem at your home game. I imagine it's not for most of you. I do like to keep this thing hidden. I don't tell the players what all the effects are, and at my table, they haven't actually hit them all now. Of course, if they listen to this, I guess they'll know. But if you're going to implement this in your game, I would suggest that you do the same thing. It really adds into the excitement. If the party knows that there's a negative crit chart that they have to roll on now, it's like, oh man, I don't know what's going to happen. And it makes for some interesting and fun interactions mid-combat, which is always a good thing because combat can get, a little toilsome at times, and this spices it up a bit. So if you enjoy this, like I said, I'll put this up on our website and y'all can add it to your games. So that's my crit negative chart for attack rolls and spell attack rolls. This is the one I use for checks when they roll a crit negative on a skill check. And at 1, we call that one lack of confidence. And you have disadvantage on all checks until you succeed on a check or that you have a long rest. 2 is a false sense of confidence. You are so positive that you succeeded that no one else can try the check. 3 is crazy pills. And the opposite of what you wanted to have happen is what happens. 4 is frustrated, and you scream, and it can be heard for 300 feet. And this one's really funny if it goes off in a dungeon because you can send everybody running after the party. And 5 is you manhandled it, and you break whatever you were trying to work on. So if it's a lock on a chest, that lock's now jammed or broke, and you can't open it by normal means. And if you roll a 6, I call that one starting over, and nothing happens, and you just get to try again. For my saving throw crit negative chart, I do a d10 roll on that. 1 will be what I call Uno reversal, and you reflect the damage or effect back at the caster. 2 is that was weird, and the DM just gets to add an effect of his choice. Make this fitting. If someone's casting a fireball, you don't turn them into a block of ice. That doesn't make sense. 3 is lingering. You are susceptible to the damage type or to the effect that you failed against for the next minute. 4 is lasting effect. It doubles the effect time. You re-roll on the chart if there's no effect on the spell that was cast at you. 5 is dazed, and you have disadvantage on the next save or check. I do have one caveat here. I don't let someone, after they roll this, just be like, oh, I will now make a investigation check on the room. Keep it fair. 6 is bad teammate, and you get to roll that D8 or pick someone and give the effect or the damage to a teammate. 7 is denial. You lie to yourself and say that it wasn't that bad. Nothing happens for 2 rounds, then you take double damage or double the effect. And this extends beyond combat, so if you have damage coming, you still take it even if the combat ends. 8 is slapstick. You save, but in a goofy way of the DM's choice, but it costs you bonus actions the next round. 9 is overload, and one of your attuned items stops working for the rest of this combat. And 10, I call rapid recovery, and you just make the save. We really enjoy all these charts at my table. It keeps it fun. It gives you extra dice to roll. I always think that's a good thing. I'm a sucker for, dropping die anytime you can. And you end up with all kinds of fun stuff happening. Like we had a sharpshooter ranger one time. Missed, turned around, rolled a nat 20. Bam, dropped that baddie in one shot. It was great. Everyone loved it. It was the first nat 20 they'd rolled on the negative crit chart. And the whole table was like, oh man, you killed it. It's awesome. So much better than a miss. Now it's time for a homebrewed item of the week. This week's homebrewed item comes from a place near and dear to my heart because it's coffee based. My wife and I actually run a small coffee truck. Shout out to Sleepy Dog Coffee, shameless plug there. And this one was a joy for me to brew up. It's the Almost Boundless bottle of coffee. And I know you think that sounds familiar. There is a D&D item that is the bottomless bottle of coffee, but all that does is give you as much hot coffee you want, which, let's face it, in the real world, that would be freaking amazing, but this is D&D, and we want more. So here's how this item works in my game. It's a magical stone thermos with a wooden handle, and each day at dawn, it brews up 3 cups worth of coffee that can be drunk by one person or split amongst the group. And each cup will do some fun things. So starting off, the first 2 cups work off of a D8 chart, and the third works off of a D10, and the stakes go up the more you drink. So let's check out these charts. The first roll is a D8, and if you roll a 1, you get the jitters, and that's -1 to hit for the day. If you get a 2, that's a caffeine crash. That's -1 to damage rolls after midday, each damage die. 3 makes you cranky, and you have disadvantage on interactions that require checks for the day. 4 is anticipation. You can give yourself advantage on 1 roll during the day. 5 means you're jazzed, and that gives you +5 movement speed for the day. 6 is charged up. You get +2 to your initiative roll for the day. 7 is focused, and you get +1 to hit for the day. And 8 is jacked up, and it's +1 to damage die roll for each die. The second cup here, and this chart is only for someone who is drinking their second cup, not the second cup out of the thermos. So if you split the cup up between 3 different people, they would each just roll on the first chart. But if you have a second cup after the first one, you keep the previous effects unless you roll the same number, and then the later cup takes precedence. So if you roll a 1, now you're twitchy, and that's -2 to hit for the day. 2 is that must have been decaf, and you get -2 to damage rolls on each die for the day. 3 is manic, and you have disadvantage on interactions, but you're insistent that you are the face of the party for the day, and you speak and run on sentences. I must just live with that one constantly. 4 is worry, and the DM will impose disadvantage on you at one time during the day, the DM's discretion. 5 is not so fast, and you lose 5 movement speed. 6 is you can't stop me. Your initiative rolls are never lower than a 15. 7 is mental targeting computer, and you get +2 to hit, and your crit number is 1 lower. So if you crit on a 19, it would be an 18. If you have a normal crit at 20, you would crit on a 19. 8 is energetic, and you get to add 1d6 elemental damage to your attacks. You pick the damage type when you drink the coffee. The third cup, and this one's on a D10 chart, and this is where things start to get fun because the stakes are raised. 1, the whole pot. Why? You have disadvantage on attack rolls for the entire day. 2, caffeine junkie. -2 damage on rolls until you get a positive effect from the pot of coffee. As an evil DM, I'm kind of waiting for someone to get this one and then have some random thief move in and steal the pot so the people just have to live with it. If you get 3, you become the pretentious ass, and any sentence that you speak that isn't about coffee causes you pain, and you take 1 damage every time. As the DM, you just keep a tally for this. This is fun. People don't realize how many sentences they say when they're speaking, and you can kind of trickle them into it. And like, hey, do you want to roll to investigate? Yeah, sure. Boom. That was a sentence, and you just keep the damage tally. Every time they get to 10, drop that damage gavel on them. Cue maniacal laughter. 4 is too much. Disadvantage on the first round in each fight, and the DM gets to give out disadvantage at some point during the day. 5 is speed demon, and you have to use all of your movement each round of combat. 6 is supercharged. You get plus 10 to initiative, but after 20, it loops back around. So this works on a roll. You add your initiative bonus, and then you add the 10 to it. And let's say you like roll a 14. That would be 24. Now your initiative is 4. 7 is overexcited, and you get -1 to hit, but you get +2 to damage rolls. And your crit and crit neg are both 1 number higher. So your crit neg will be on 1 or 2, and your critical hit will be on 19 or 20. 8 is the energy savant, and you get to add 2d6 elemental damage. You pick the element at the time that you drank the cup. 9 is the sweet spot. You get +2 to attack rolls, checks, and saves, or anywhere else you can figure it out within reason. But you just get +2 to everything for the day. And 10 we call 3-cup perfection. You get +3 to 1 stat for the day, and it can go over 20. You can auto crit 1 time a day, and you can use this after you make the roll. So if you miss, you can just be like, I'm going to use my auto crit. And you can take or give advantage 2 times a day. And here's the carrot that gets the players to take this chance and try to drink all the cups, because this D10 chart really only has 3 good things on it. If you get at least 1 positive effect on the first 2 cups, and then you roll a 10, when this happens to you 3 times in the game, so you have to drink all 3 cups at least 3 times, and roll a 10 on the 3rd cup, you can increase 1 stat point, and it can go over 20. So that's my bottle of Almost Boundless coffee. I thought it was a fitting homebrewed item to add in, since today's all about charts, and this one comes with a plethora of those. Okay, the next section that we're going over for this episode is a mechanic I've made for taming creatures. And I have a group, and they're slowly trying to build a menagerie, and I love it. But besides just doing like a simple animal handling check or persuasion or whatever, when you meet, that brown bear that the party wants to add into the group, I felt like that wasn't very, realistic, which I guess is kind of funny to say, being we're playing D&D and people are throwing fireballs and their hands don't get burned, but they can still take fire damage. Doesn't make a lot of sense. But for me, when it comes to taming animals, I thought, hey, we need a big complicated system. And this is what I've come up with. And it's basically a fun mini game that you can add in for taming animals in your game. So here's what we got. When you see a creature that you want to tame, you got to make a first contact roll. And that's basically going to let you decide if you get the option of, peacefully negotiating with this animal. And if you're already in combat, all these DCs go up by 5. These are basically based off of the creature's demeanor toward you. And so if the creature is wild and hostile, it'll have a high DC, like 25. If it's wild or hostile, it'll be a DC 20. If the creature's neutral, it'll be a DC 15. And if the creature's used to people, like it was someone else's horse or dog, it'll be a DC 10. And that'll be the roll you make right off the start. And if they succeed on this check, they can start trying to tame the creature, but this will take a lot more checks. And, yay, more dice. That's what it's all about. They can do this as part of a downtime or however you want to work it out in your game as they keep trying to train the creature. I do have a few caveats for this. They have to have a safe place to keep the animal, and you have to have someone, whether it's you or someone you hire, there to feed and water it, just like it would need if it was your pet. I mean, you just can't have an untrained owlbear running amok in the city and you hopping in once a month and being like, hey, buddy, here's some fish. Let me ride you. That doesn't work. So to domesticate the creature, each week we do 3 checks, and the number of weeks it takes to tame the creature will be equal to the creature's CR plus 1 rounded up. So it's always at least a 2-week minimum. The DC for these 3 checks will be 8 plus the creature's CR level, plus an alignment modifier. And the way I do alignment modifiers, if the creature's chaotic evil, it gets plus 5 to that DC. lawful evils 4, chaotic neutrals 3, neutrals 2, chaotic good is 1, lawful neutrals 1, and if it's a lawful good creature, it doesn't get anything extra added to it. So with that set, the 3 checks, the player character will get to pick between Arcana, History, Nature, Animal Handling, Insight, or Persuasion. And they can pick those 3 each week, so they kind of get, a plethora of those to pick the ones that they were most likely to succeed at. After they make their checks, we see how the training went for that week. If they're 0 for 3 on the checks, that monster is going to break loose, do damage to the surrounding area, and the party's going to have to pay a fine of 100 gold times the monster CR level, and the creature is going to disappear. So if you miss all 3 checks in a week before the creature's domesticated, it's just gone. If you get 1 out of 3 checks, the monster escapes, but if it can be recaptured peacefully, you can try to put it back into your menagerie of animals, but you do have to roll on the next chart, which is going to be our creature complication chart, and we'll go over that at the end. If you do any damage to the creature, it'll become violent and fight you and can't be recaptured. If you get 2 out of 3 checks, the monster is somewhat compliant. You get half credit on your week's trainings for domesticating it, but you do have to roll on the creature flaw chart. And if you get 3 out of 3, the monster's close to being trained, and to show that you're doing a good job working with it, next week you'll get +1 to all your ability checks for this, and this can stack up to 5. My theory is if you're having good training sessions with the pet owlbear, it's going to be more friendly with you, and the sessions will keep going well as long as you keep its trust. I allow the party member that's doing the domesticating of the animal to bring a treat or a toy or some sort of special food if it's on theme with the creature that you're trying to train. That lets them get advantage on one of those 3 checks. After they go through this, you guess what time it is now. It's time for our creature complication chart. And that one's going to be a D8. And if you roll a 1, the authorities find that you have an illegal or dangerous pet, and they fine you 200 gold a week to keep quiet until you get it domesticated. 2, the pet gives you a lingering wound, and you get -2 to hit for 3 days after you start back adventuring. As the training, the crap smacked out of you or bit the hand that feeds, so to say. This does not go away during downtime, and if this happens, you have to roll in the creature flaw chart. I know, Incepta chart, a chart inside of the chart. It's crazy. If you roll a 3, the creature breaks stuff. You number all the items you have equipped, roll a die that's big enough to cover that number, and then 1 item is destroyed. Farewell, Flame-Tongue Sword. Sad panda time. And you still have to roll on the flaw chart. 4 is scared. The creature loses trust in you, and you have -1 to your checks for next week, and you have to roll on the flaw chart. 5 is just flaw, and you roll on the flaw chart. 6 is weakened, and the creature's HP, when it is domesticated, will be 10% lower. And 7 is, oh, it got me, and you're going to suffer a status effect, and this will be based off of what kind of creature you had, and that lasts for 3 days after you start adventuring again. And number 8 will be baby talk, where you're allowed to baby talk the animal into forgiving you for your transgressions, and you don't suffer anything negative for the week. All right, let's check out the creature flaw chart that you have to roll on if you roll a 2 through 5 on the previous chart. And this one's a D20, and I named them goofily again because I think it's fun when it pops up at the table. If you roll a 1, the creature's hungry, and it takes double the food and water to maintain after it's domesticated. 2, your creature is slow, and it loses 5 speed. 3, the creature is disobedient, and sometimes it just won't obey. As the DM, I roll a D8 each time the creature is given a command, and on an 8, it is now not going to follow that. Always fun when it happens. 4 is noisy, and it has disadvantage on stealth checks while it's in the party. 5 is smelly, and creatures with good sense of smell can smell the creature from 300 feet away. 6 is scared, and it flees when it takes damage the second time during the day. 7, the creature wanders. At a short or long rest, it may just wander away. Same thing, I roll a D8 each time there's a short or long rest, and on an 8, it wanders off, and they have to go try to find it. 8, the creature has the mange, and people are repulsed by the side of it, and they won't deal with you while the creature's in your party. 9, the creature is angry, and it will randomly attack people it doesn't know. As this, I roll a D12, and on a 12, it'll attack random walkerbys. 10, it loves people, and it just randomly begs from food from strangers and for pets, because it's such a good boy and girl. For this, I roll a d6, and on a 6, the creature goes walkabout looking for love. 11 is jealous, and this creature will misbehave anytime its tamer interacts with other creatures. 12, your creature is no longer rideable if it was. 13, your creature is weak and it loses 1 to damage rolls. 14, your creature has bad eyes. It has -1 to hit on its to hit rolls. 15, your creature's spoiled and it will only work for food or treats. 16, your creature's sleepy, and instead of doing what it should, it just randomly falls asleep when you give it a command. Same thing, I roll a d8. 17, this one's a chewer, and at a long rest, it'll destroy 1 piece of the party's gear. I roll a d20 for this one so it doesn't come up a lot, and on a 20, you just get to pick an item off the party, and that's what the creature eats. I would probably number these out and roll it and just count them around like whatever each person had equipped. That way it would seem fair and you wouldn't have to pick one person's item to destroy. Although I imagine this will upset the party. It's never come up at the table, but oh man, I can't wait until it does. At 18, your creature's poorly trained and it will just randomly leave the party at some point. I roll a d100 at each long rest, and on a 99 or a 100, it is no longer domesticated, and it just walks away. 19, this creature is savage, and it gets +1 to its hit and damage rolls. And 20, this creature is toughened, and it gets +1 to its constitution and +1 HP per level. So the last two, there are flaws, but they make your creature a bit better. I like to keep it a little bit interesting. Now for the final part of this, after you've domesticated and tamed your beast, what do you do with it after that? And the way we work this at my table is whoever tamed the animal can then use part of their day to go and make 3 training checks, and they get to pick like sit, come, whether they want the creature to be rideable, fetch, like whatever you can think of. You can make 3 checks during each day. If the creature's with you, you can do it there, or if it's somewhere else, you got to make arrangements to get to it. We keep a tally of those, and how well the creature is trained affects how well it obeys commands in combat. And so if it's had like 1 to 5 successful trainings, we'll set a DC out of combat of like 10 if you want the creature to go fetch an item. But if it's in combat, since there's like stress involved, we'll raise that DC, and so it'd be like 16. If it's had more training though, like 6 to 10, your out of combat DC for things will be a 7, and in combat will be a 12. 11 to 19 successful trainings, out of combat DC will be like a 3, so it's almost an auto success, and in combat DC for a command will be like a 10, and on 20 it's an auto success out of combat and a DC 4 in combat. I use these as straight rolls. There's no guidance or proficiencies added in. It does make for some hijinks when we've got a pet owlbear at the table we're at. It was told to stay, it rolled really poorly, and then it just went right into the mix, and then everyone's worried about their pet owlbear out there taking hits. And so it's a fairly complex system that I've come up with here. I think it's fun. It plays like a mini game on whether or not you can sneak up on that creature that you see instead of just everyone rolling initiative and trying to attack it. And it gives the players that are interested in having pets at the table an opportunity without just letting it be overrun. So there's like a defined system. Anyone can use it. Certain players are obviously going to have advantages at it depending on what skill proficiency they have. And I think that's fitting because yes, the druid and the ranger should be a little bit better at taming animals than the fighter is possibly. And so at our table, once a player's got a domesticated and tamed animal and they want to bring it out into combat with them, I use their bonus action to give commands to it. And so it doesn't step over action economy too much. I do try to limit, I have a big table. There's 8 PCs at it right now. We can't run a table with 8 PCs and 8 animals running around. So I try to limit it to, 2 extra creatures out at a time. Right now, it's not a problem. They've only got the 1 owlbear. But that's something you just have to work out with your team. And most players are understanding that, we can't run combat with 20 PCs and 30 monsters to fight. That just take the entire night. I think these charts are great from a player and a DM perspective. Both of y'all are going to get to roll a bunch of die, and who doesn't love that anticipation of, what's going to happen now with this when you've got a chart and it's going to do crazy things. I think it's one of the true joys of a D20 system is the dice get to decide, and if you add this stuff in with homebrew material, it's just more stuff that the dice get to decide and adds a little bit of, chaos and hilarity into the games. When also as a DM like having charts for negative effects. That way, if a player has a bad night, it's just a chart. It's never you singling them out, and I think that keeps everything copacetic at the table and makes for more enjoyable evenings. Like I said, the dice are king at the table. They decide what happens. And like I said earlier, I'll put the negative crit chart up, and if anyone's interested, I know the monster taming system is a big, large mechanic. If anyone's interested, send me an email. I'll try to figure out a way to get you a copy of that. And I think that's all we have for today. Thanks for taking the time to listen. I really appreciate it. Well, folks, that's it for this episode of Dragons and Dice. Thanks for listening, and if you like what we're doing here, please like, subscribe, or leave a review. It really helps with exposure of a new show. And until next time, may your DM be kind, and may your random chart rolls be sublime. Bye.